But before then, we got tonight's lecture from Giorgio van Straten, who is the director of the Fondazione Alinari, and he's going to tell us a lot about the extraordinary archives they have there. And before we start the lecture, I just want to thank Angela and Richard Camber, who are tonight's sponsors. Thank you to them. Round of applause. Very good. Adesso passo la parola a Giorgio.
Buonasera a tutti, grazie di essere qua. Much has been said regarding the presence of the British in Florence during the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. So I have no ambition to say anything new and no space and time to carry out an exhaustive survey on this subject. What I seek to do tonight is tell you something about the British presence in Florence through the photograph of Alinari Archives. And by doing so, I will tell you something about Alinari as well. Alinari Archives are one of the earliest photo archives in the world, the earliest we actually believe, and so far no one has denied it. The three Alinari brothers, Leopoldo, Giuseppe, and Romualdo, opened a photography firm in Florence in 1852, which moved to its historical site at the end of Via Nazionale at a small square today named Largo Alinari, after them, in 1863. The company specialized in the reproduction of artworks. For decades, it has been possible to study Italian and other countries' art history thanks to Alinari black and white photos, but also produced portraits, photos of landscapes, architectures, narrating Florence and Italy. In our material, there are more than 5 million objects, mostly negatives, or prints, slides, but also photography equipment, documents, etc., purchased in 2019 by the Tuscany region with a courageous and far-seeing decision. Therefore, the vastness of our collection allows us to retrace the British presence in Florence in the century spanning from the 30s of 19th century to the first half of the 20th. Anyway, I won't start from Alinari Archives, but from an anecdote I read in a publication entitled Anglo-Fiorentini di 100 anni fa, published in 1953 and written by Juliana Acton Treves. Here is the anecdote. A hotel owner, on his way back from an errand, ran into one of his employees, a porter. Some English have arrived, the hotel porter said to the owner, but I haven't understood if they are Russians or Germans. From this rather funny and probably true story, we deduce that the percentage took on the same of English people among foreigners in Florence was so high that the two terms took on the same meaning. That is, English and foreigner became synonymous. And until now, when we say Inglesi, English, we intend not all the foreigners, but all the people coming from the Great Britain. Okay, we don't say Britannic, we say Inglesi, also for Scottish and for people coming from Wales and so on. And indeed, as noted by an English observer of those days, Florence is a resort for strangers from every part of the world. The gay society is a mixture of all nations, of whom 1/3 may be Florentine, 1/3 English, and the remaining part equally divided between Russians, Germans, French, Poles, and Americans. That's how some places, objects, habits that were particularly associated with the foreigner's presence in Florence took on names derived from the prevailing presence of an English. Places that are very much linked to the city life, such as, and we start with our photo, La Panchina degli Inglesi, the English bench, along via San Francesco in Fiesole, offering a stunning view over Florence, like we could see in the distance. And il cimitero degli Inglesi, the English cemetery, actually a non-Catholic cemetery built by the Swiss Evangelical Church in the 20s of the 19th century, just outside the city walls, then turned down when Florence became capital of Italy. Because until then, those who were neither Catholic nor Jewish could not be buried in Florence, but had to be taken to Livorno. The English cemetery, today right in the middle of the area di circonvallazione, as you know, is one of the best known places in town by Florentines, although very few of them ever stepped into it. I did so quite recently because the English nun in charge of it decided to donate to our foundation the Alinari photos she owned. And she owned because in the past, those photographs were used for the education of young English ladies studying art in Florence. Some more or less renowned British citizens are buried there. The best known probably is Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And you can see here a photo of his tomb. But what was Elizabeth Barrett Browning doing in Florence? And more generally, what were all those British doing there? The answer comes from Samuel Rogers, a poet, who wrote in 1830 a poem called Italy. And he said, if rich, they go to enjoy. If poor, to retrench. If sick, to recover. If studious, to learn. If learn, to relax from the studies. In a case, I would say, in the case of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, I would say, if sick, to recover. Florence climate was considered healthy, no doubt because everything is relative. Considering the humidity rate, especially in summer, of the city sitting in a hollow amid hills. Once there, Elizabeth Barrett Browning got very much involved with the Italian life and politics. Like many British, she actually became a supporter of Italian Risorgimento and the struggle for the unification of Italy. And the heroes of Risorgimento became famous in England, where Garibaldi portraits sold so successfully that there was someone, a Swedish photographer living in London, Oscar Gustav Reilander, who took a picture of himself in guise of Garibaldi because he loved to dress up, yes, but also because perhaps he wanted to sell it in the United Kingdom. But if you have a closer look at the inscription, it doesn't say Giuseppe, but Giuseppe. Is it a mistake or a trick to escape any ante litteram issue of image rights? I don't know. In any case, you can see they have the same dress, the same sword. It's perfect. No? The face is different, and also the okay. In any case, another place that was named after the English presence was Mr. Robert's pharmacy. Robert was a chemist who came to Florence for health reasons, and in consideration of this pharmacy popularity, decided to start his own production. At his death, the business kept on flourishing until it became Manetti and Roberts, acclaimed for its Borotalco. There is a famous advertising, se non è Roberts non è Borotalco, and Acqua di Rose. A city with so many foreigners obviously needed hotels, which right in those days were becoming full-fledged accommodation options rather than private homes where passing by travelers were taken in. Many hotels were named after places in the United Kingdom. For example, on the left, you have Hotel York at Via Cerretani. This picture is taken, it's not the hotel, it's taken from its windows and showing Il Duomo, our cathedral, with no facade yet. It was built starting from 1876. A lot of tourists took pictures, but it's a relatively new facade. And on the right, you can see, I think, near here, 50 meters from here, l'Hotel des Îles Britanniques, Governo Guicciardini, and you can see in the enlargement the sign of the hotel. And we have also Hotel et Pension d'Angleterre, also at Via Cerretani, and on the other, and on the right, I have to say one thing, because Hotel des Îles Britanniques, Hotel et Pension d'Angleterre, in those days French was considered the international lingua franca, notwithstanding the presence of so many English speakers. And on the right, you can see Hotel Bristol at Lungano Bertucci, later became Helvetia Bristol, and still there at Via de Pescioni. And in the end, the interior, the beautiful interiors of Hotel Gran Bretagna, which was at Chiasso dei Del Bene, a street connecting Borgo Santi Apostoli to Lungano Acciaioli. And I would like to make a brief digression. The acronym APA, you can see in the code of the photo, stands for Pictures Made Upon Commission. That it means that is paid for by the owners of companies, palaces, or first institutions, for example, not such as San Salvi Psychiatric Hospital, for example, who needed them as documentation, memory also, and in some cases used them also for promotional purposes. The Alinari were active in this business for several decades, actually for longer than a century. And in our archives are large format book, you can see one, where all that information pertaining to the commissions was taken note of. The commissioner, the object of the commission, the number of pictures delivered, and so on. In which now these huge books, which are being restored now, and I dare to say that we have many expensive restoration projects underway, and should anyone who feels like supporting us is welcome. All these British people in town needed their places of worship. That is what is now the Waldensian Church at Via La Marmora was then an Anglican church where the English people gathered in 1910 to celebrate the recent death of their sovereign, Edward VII. One more technical digression. These double images are called stereoscopic. I wonder if those of you of my age still remembers a device called Viewmaster. It was a viewer that coupled two slightly different pictures to create a three-dimensional effect. That's how stereoscopy used to work. This is an original viewer from those days. And when you see the cardboard, they put the photos, the stereoscopic photos. So I was mentioning the sovereigns. Florence was a landmark city for them too, and in particular for Queen Victoria, who visited our city several times. The Brogi Studio, another important photography firm whose archive has become part of ours, made her a portrait of extremely high photographic quality, as you can see. I think it's really a beautiful portrait. It was shot in Florence in 1894. But in those times, there were also the quote-unquote stolen photos, almost a case of photojournalism of those days. Queen Victoria of England, here, with her daughter, Princess Beatrice of Battenberg, while crossing the square of the Cascina in Florence on March 27, 1888. When in Florence, Queen Victoria was invited to stay at the most beautiful villas in town. For example, at Villa Fabbricotti, which now hosted our office, and where a plate was placed in memory of her stay. The caption to the photos, which were taken inside the villa, report that those premises had been furnished for the stay of Her Majesty the Queen. Meaning they were furnished especially for that occasion. To answer this question, we looked into another visit the Queen made to Florence. This time she was the guest of Alexander William Crawford Lindsay, the 25th Earl of Crawford, born in 1812, and died in Florence at the end of the century. He was a Scottish peer, art historian and collector who had bought Villa Palmieri. And you can see Villa Palmieri. An article published by the New York Times on 29th April of 1888, discussing her visit, unveiled the mystery of the furnishing. Quote, the Queen's private rooms at Villa Palmieri, which are in the upper floor, have been almost entirely furnished from Windsor. Her Majesty sending a bedstead with its furniture, a bath, all the washing apparatus, a rocking chair, 2 armchairs, a sofa, a writing table, as well as 2 portraits of the Prince Consort, a box of photographs of the family members, and a basket of books. So the Queen would have what she needed to feel at home in Florence too, sent over before her arrival. We can see here, this is the small lake pond in the park of Villa Palmieri. This is the courtyard, and this is the very similar to those in Villa Fabbricotti, indeed, and during her stay. And perhaps it is a writing table, I suppose, and the sofa in the distance. Okay. Villa Palmieri is one of the many villas purchased and restored by British owners who truly took care also of the gardens surrounding them. In the case of Villa Palmieri, after a few decades, you can notice how plants and trees have grown. Because the first photo on the left is of 1865, and the one on the right was taken in 1880. 30 years between them, and you can see the difference. What I want to say is that the first pictures dates back to 1865, and the author of this photo is an English photographer who had moved to Florence. His name was John Brampton Philpott. He was born in the same date of the owner of Villa Palmieri, in 12. And he appears among those involved in the origins of photography in Tuscany, and in particular in Florence. He began working in the city of Florence using the calotype technique. The calotype technique is the first kind of negatives in history, because the photos before, for example, daguerreotypes, are only one image. You can't duplicate them. No, it's just one photo, like one painting. Or then an English guy, Talbot, found a way to reproduce the image from a negative. And this technique was called calotype. John Brampton Philpott arrived in the early 1850s in Florence, and then continued with the commercial activity of reproductions of art and views. This is one of my favorite ones. It's very, very beautiful. It's the Arno near Ponte Santa Trinita. In this case, the part between Ponte Santa Trinita and Ponte Vecchio. Seen as a whole, his photos are a significant iconographic repertory of the taste and the idea of Tuscany according to the foreigners, who were his most important clients. In his view of Florence, he shows an unprecedented prowess to combine pictorial sensitivity or romantic origin with the medium's ability to witness the changes affectioning the territory. In other words, the photograph is, from the beginning, at the same time, a document and a work of art. You can see some photos. This is the Fuller of Grace, now the Museo Galileo. This is a panorama of Florence from San Miniato, Piazza Santissima Annunziata, Lungarno Corsini, la Meridiana, Popoli Gardens, and la Grotta del Buontalenti. This is a beautiful view of Fiesole from San Domenico. And the other one that I love very much is this photo of San Miniato, and you can see the difference from now, the dilapidated houses, and also the ground, no, in front of the Chiesa is completely different from now. Philpott remained in Florence and died in 1878. But let's go back to these wealthy British citizens who arrived in Florence and settled down at prestigious villas. Their present is deeply felt in the city, also in terms of important political decisions made. For instance, at the time of destruction, knocking down, I don't know, of the ghetto in the city center, we can see some photos of how it looked before and of the destruction of the ghetto to have Piazza della Repubblica. Some of them joined the Associazione per la Salvaguardia della Firenze Antica, which didn't save the old Jewish ghetto, but prevented other horrors to happen. For instance, the proposal to open a street as large as for Santa Maria, connecting Piazza della Signoria to Teruan, but many other projects. I think that this project fell down not only for the opposition, but also because the capital went to Rome, and the municipality of Florence made bankrupt. So I think this is the main reason. But in any case, what is strange, what it's odd, is that those British citizens didn't show the same respect for Florence architectural and urban identity when their properties are at stake. From now on, we'll see many pictures of the buildings they owned, but hardly any of their owners. Maybe they didn't turn to Alinari for their portraits, or maybe those portraits were not digitized, because we have now only, quote unquote, 250,000 files of photos out of 5 million. Thanks to PNRR, we will be able to digitize 80,000 historic plates in the next 2 years. Anyway, I think that homes of those British owners stood for their portraits, inasmuch they represented their taste, habits, and way of life. Let's take John Temple Leader, an English politician of radical ideas who had inherited a vast fortune from his father, a trader. Born in 1810, he left England in 1844 without giving much explanation, moving first to the south of France and then to Florence. In 1850, he bought Villa I Pazzi at Borgo di Maiano. In 1855, he bought the dilapidated medieval castle of Vincigliata, that one. In 1857, a house at Piazza Pitti. He also bought Villa I Tatti later taken over by Bernard Peretson. Let's look at Vincigliata first. Rebuilt on its ruins, this is probably the photograph of a photograph, because the Broggi took it when they were commissioned to illustrate the totally rebuilt castle. In that medieval style, that was was rebuilt. In that medieval style, that was so fashionable in those days, in particular in the furnishing. This is the castle in this day. You can see also in this case a lot of new trees growing up. This is the castle. This is the tower. You see before how it was and how it became. And in the interior, you can see now the armory. This is the bedroom. This is the dining room with this huge table. It seems really from medieval, and also the kitchen, the same type of furnishing. Nothing of them is true. Not, but perhaps some of the furnishing, yes, it's furniture coming from the past, but not for this place. It's completely rebuilt. And let's continue with Maiano there, and so it's he didn't need to rebuild, but for example, its old quarry turned into a pond. Yeah. And here you have this pond used, no? With rowing, swimming, and so on. The picture you see are taken from an album. The album collection, including more than 6,000 historic ones, is another highlight of Alinari. A unique collection, the largest in Italy and one of the most important in the world. The collection includes a variety of genres: the travel souvenir with views and reproduction of work of art, the travel memoir of amateur photographers, family albums, albums with portraits of famous social figures, nobles, politicians, artists, soldiers, scientists, photos like the one of Garibaldi, no? Carte de visite, small portrait, and a commemorative album of major events that mark Italian or European history, such as those dedicated to Universal Exposition, wartime conflict, from the Crimean War to the World War II. A considerable number of British nationals chose Florence as their residence and bought villas, in most cases the best in the city and its surroundings. I'll pick up only a few of them and proceed in rigorous chronological order. The first of them, Francis Joseph Sloane, born in 1795, a geologist, collector, and philanthropist, worked for the Grand Duke, gaining considerable wealth and reputation. In 1848, he purchased the Medici's Villa di Careggi, this one, where Lorenzo Magnifico had died. Over time, he bought several of the villas, among which Le Fontanelle, which is now the site of Scuola di Musica di Fiesole. Or Frederick, this is another, or Frederick Stibbert, born in 1838, is still well known thanks to the museum named after him. We can see him in this photo taken in Florence race skirts. Is the gentleman with a mustache on the left of the photo. Born in Florence, Frederick Stibbert, from an English father and an Italian mother. In a letter to his brother Thomas, he explained his choice to live in our city. Quote, "The motive which induced me to fix my residence in Florence is the mildness of the climate, the protection afforded to all foreigners, and the liberty of living unfettered by any restraint or odious civil obligation." And I think this is one of the main reasons, not only to relax or to recover, but to stay in a place that is very friendly and tolerant. You know, the Tuscany was the first place in Italy for sure, I don't know, in Europe, to stop the death as a pain. Frederick Stibbert was the descendant of a military family, and he also joined Garibaldi as a volunteer in 1866. He spent almost his whole life at Villa di Montughi. You can see from Villa Fabbricotti, and this is the villa. Bought by his mother and his father. He gradually turned it into a museum of the history of costumes and traditions, containing objects he had bought during his long travels abroad. The garden, the villa, and its exhibits were largely transformed and restored, as usual, without any philological concern. You can see the tower and also all these coat of arms put on the walls that obviously came from other places. Stibbert continued to live there until his death in 1906, without ever separating the living quarters from the exhibition ones. When I was, this is also in the park now, you see a Venice Logetta, and the other one is a small Egyptian temple, and so on. And these the interiors. And I would like to speak about the cavalry. Because when I was a kid, I used to live close to the museum, and I still remember being mesmerized by the cavalcade of the armors in the May. Oh, living almost the same years as Stibbert was Alexander Fagan, that was born in 1845, an Anglo-Italian and a descendant of British diplomats. He had, as you can see, very different tastes from Stibbert. This difference is evident in the decision first to live within the city and not on the hills, as all the villas you saw. At the villa he commissioned, located on the Viale di Circonvallazione, not far from il Cimitero degli Indians. And completely different are also the interiors. You can see the living room. We might define him a modernist, as shown by his decision to commission his portrait from John Singer Sargent, the well-known American artist born in Florence in 1856, where he studied and where he often came back after moving to the United States. Alexander Fagan was a painter and an art historian, worked at the British Museum, and then died in Florence at the very beginning of the new century. Obviously, you can see also the sculpture more in another 18th taste, but oddly enough, he decided to turn a room of his villa into a cabinet making workshop where architecture models were manufactured. And I don't know if the one on the right is a true place or something he thought of. Another English in Florence was Herbert Horne. Was a later entry to Florence, where he first arrived in 1894, and definitely settled in 1896. An architect and an art historian, he provided consultancy for the purchase of artworks to major museums such as the Met and the National Gallery. He then became a collector himself, and in 1911 purchased Corsi Palace on the corner of Via dei Benci and Corso Tintori, which, in line with the change of time and fashion, he restored with special philological attention, and where he displayed his collection. And the last person I would like to speak of is Harold Acton. born in 1904, lived in Florence at a time that falls hardly within the scope of my presentation. His parents, in fact, arrived in Florence in the early days of the 20th century and bought Villa La Pietra in 1907. But he studied in England and lived many years in China before coming back to Florence after World War II. If I decided to include him is because he gained a vast reputation due to the splendor of his villa, which is nowadays the site of the New York University. This is the entrance to the villa. This is the front facade and the back. The garden with a beautiful view of the city. And I choose also this photo of a young woman in costume because I think shows the action, that the action taste was very much about an Italian sweetness of living. I remember always a famous phrase by Talleyrand, those who didn't live before the revolution didn't know what the sweetness of living is. And I think this is true also for Harold Acton. He was that kind of person, a dandy who inspired Evelyn Waugh for the character of Anthony Blanche in Brideshead Revisited. A major role in this story, going to the conclusion, a major role in the story of British presence is played by the women, who are part of this story, not only as wives or mistresses, but mainly for their ability to become, Elizabeth Padet Brown in her place, important characters in the social, cultural, and also economic life of the city. For this final part of my presentation, I indebted to the papers presented at the conferenza Una sconfinata infatuazione, an endless infatuation, held in 2011, and in particular to Irene Scampolli's contribution on Janet Ross and Tiziana Masucci on Violet Refuses, so Violette Refusi, which language you decide to use. Janet Ross, born in 1842, came to Florence with her husband in 1867. She purchased Villa di Poggio Gherardo in 1888 and renovated it in the medieval-inspired style of those days. For its furnishing, this is the beautiful view of Florence with Florence in the distance and the garden. And this is a photo from the interiors. This is one of the two only photos I'm not having the archives in my presentation. The reason is that we don't have images of the interiors of Villa Poggio Gherardo, but most of all because this is a photo from British Institute Archives, and so this is an homage to my host. She turned to Florentine antique dealers, but she ended up starting a trade in furniture and paintings, which improved her finances. In particular, it's worth mentioning a super painting by Luca Signorelli, sold to the Berlin-Gemäldegalerie Gallery, and unfortunately lost during the Second World War. She was also a writer, a journalist, committed to promote the image of Florence abroad. Among her books, Italian sketches and Florentine villas, obviously, but also leaves from our Tuscan kitchen or how to cook vegetables. Lady Alice Keppel, born in 1868, was a Scottish noblewoman, Edward VII's mistress, and the great-grandmother of Queen Consort Camilla. At Edward's death in 1910, she left England and moved to Florence, where she purchased Villa dell'Ombrellino. The name is because the ombrellino you see in the middle of the photo now it's not there, but in any case, where Galileo and Ugo Foscolo had also lived among others. She refurbished both the building and the surrounding garden, which in 1926 was transformed into an Italian garden designed by an English architect, obviously. A wonderful house. This is the second photo. It's not from Alinari Archives, and I put only because she's so beautiful. I want to show you. A wonderful host. You would receive the best of Florentine society at the villa. And to use her daughter Violet's words, quote, she's not only had the gift of happiness, but she excelled in making others happy. She resembled a Christmas tree laden with presents for everyone. End of quote. At her death in 1947, the villa was inherited by her daughter Violet Refuses, who had spent much of her life in France, creating a circle of intellectuals, artists, and politicians. To say some names, Proust, Cocteau, Dior, Mitterrand, among others. And who followed a personal, enchanted, and free lifestyle also in Florence. The most important relationship in life was with Vita Sackville-West. And in certain cases, it's easy to live in France, or in Italy. She dedicated a novel to the city, I Pappagalli sulla, with only one P. So not the birds, Pappagalli, but a Florentine, where she portrays the city in a disillusioned, rather scornful, but also loving tone. Highlighting the similarities of the English and the Florentines, such as Mamma Pappagalli's, dobbiamo fare bella figura, which sound very much like the British keep up appearances. And she also died at the villa in 1972, as her mother. Is Violet right? In the English love for Florence, beside the fascination for the city and the artworks it contains, could one really trace a certain commonality of spirits with the Florentines? Maybe some sort of similarity favored this encounter beside the different climate and landscape? The humor, for instance? These are just questions without answers, and I'd like to close these overviews of more than a century of Anglo-Florentine relations with yet another question. This is a photo taken at Boboli. The caption mentions a possible visit by sovereigns, but I couldn't find any trace of it. I only read that in those years, I'd say the 10s or 20s of the 20th century, some patriotic demonstration took place during and after the First World War. Yet that many of our captions are corrected daily thanks to the contribution of our side visitors. Can any of you help me understand what is the event represented in this photograph? In any case, we have our two flags, one side to the other. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed, Giorgio, for a fascinating survey and lots of amazing photographs. And of course, heavily linked to this institute. Outside on the wall above the door to the stairs, there's a portrait of Alice Campbell, for example. This is the Acton Library because Harold Acton bequeathed, first of all, invited us into his palazzo, which he got from his father, Arthur. His portrait is above the photocopier, and then bequeathed it to us when he died in 1994. So several of your reference, of course, of Janet Ross and Lena Waterfield, all those people who have their papers in the archives. So the visits to Florence emerged from the world that Giorgio has been describing. So it's particularly interesting and relevant for me that we've had such an interesting description of the English community in Florence in the 19th century and into the 20th. So as always, we'll now do the question and answer, and the rules remain the same. If you're in the room and want to ask a question, please put up your hand and I will come and talk to you. Oh, sorry, I won't talk to you. I'll bring you the microphone and then you can ask your question so that people on the Zoom can hear. And if you're on the Zoom and want to put a question out, put it in the chat and I'll read it out on your behalf. Or if you want to, you can unmute and talk to us because we can see you on the big screen. And I've got to find the Zoom. So wait a second, not the Zoom, the chat. There we go. Now I've got it. So I've, whoops, it's disappeared.
It's gone.
Oh no, what happened there? It'll come back again.
Okay.
Yeah, there we are. I've got a couple of questions on the chat, but if there's someone in the room who wants to go first, yeah, Mark, I'll bring you the microphone.
Thank you very much. I thought that was absolutely fascinating talk. Also touched on so many points, the things that we're interested in about the British in Florence. One question I have is about the villa, the Castello di Vincigliata. Do we know who owns it, and is it possible to visit it ever?
Yeah, it's open. I think it's a place where people have matrimony and wedding, and then yeah. I don't know if it's still remain the same. I don't know. I don't think in the interiors because for a wedding, I think it's a little too cold, like furnitures. But yes, it's possible. It's a private place, but it's open to. Yeah. So I think you can see it.
Yeah, we've actually got an answer on the chat from Francesca Baldry, who says it's the Gayatz family own the villa. So there you go. Thanks from Patricia Thomas. Margie McKinnon says thank you. Who took the lovely photograph of Alice Keppel?
I say so. Margie is a friend, and like to say hello to her, but I don't know who took the photo because I stole it on internet without looking in to the author.
True.
Sorry.
And Margie also wants to know if the photos have been digitalized, that have been digitalized, are available online.
Yeah.
They are. Well,
if you digit the name of Alice Keppel, I think you can see.
Yeah, and the Alinari photos on the digital collection, are they available online? So you Google Alinari.
Yeah, we have a site, alinari.it, and there we have all our files that you can.
And Diane Archibald wants to know whether the Alinari photographic collection is on the elenco of the Patrimonio Beni Culturali d'Italia, registrato.
Yeah, obviously it's. I don't know the word in English to say it's.
Say it in Italian, I'll translate.
Nemmeno in italiano in questo momento. che il nostro patrimonio è vincolato.
So it's tied, it's chained,
Yeah.
it's restricted. And one last piece of information from John Law is that Vinciliato was a prisoner of war camp during the World War II.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Ah.
Okay,
I didn't know it.
yeah, now we've got a question over there. I think someone had their hand up. Over there, yeah.
Just want to know if you could tell me, if you know, if and when the collection of photographs themselves will be available to see for the general public.
Yes, because now it's in a safe place, but not open to the public, and it's still in the box of the moving from the private owner to the Regione Toscana. We are working to open the museum, the library, the photothek, and the archives in Santa Maria Novella. Santa Maria Novella, where Scuola dei Marescialli was, and where is going, I think it's going to open next year or at the end of this year, a museum of Italian language. In the same building, we are going to have also Alinari, but I think it takes 2 or 3 years to go there, because we found an arrangement between the municipality of Florence and the Tuscan region that is not, I assure you, a simple thing to do. Not so many months ago. So, but now they are completely agreed. So I think that we can start a work to have. I think it's very important for us and for the city, and also for the visitors, and so also for the foreigners, to have the Alinari in an open place. We try to use a lot our website. We made in the last few years many exhibitions with materials from our archives, but in any case, to have a museum and to have a accessible library and archive is a fundamental for us.
There's a very difficult question from John Law. Does the archive have any record of the visits of a wealthy Welsh family called the Vivians?
I don't know. I don't think, but I would like to. He could see also directly, because if they goes to our website, there is a search line. You can put the name in and see if we have someone of this family.
There you go, John. Do a web search and you'll find the answer.
But where they live in Florence, you know.
This question for you, John. You can either unmute and talk to us, or put it up on the chat. How we do that. Sarah's put up a weekly reminder for the Zoomers to make their donations or just giving. Please don't forget to do that. The link is in the chat now.
It's to ask for money.
Okay. And somebody's
Ma comune mezzo gabbio.
giusto. The chat is still working, even though the Zoom is misbehaving in a strange way. More thoughts or questions in the room at the back there. Wait a second. Let's take the microphone over.
I hope this is not a really stupid question. How did Queen Victoria's furniture get to Florence? And do we know how long she stayed here to warrant moving beds and toilets and baths and whatever else, rocking chairs?
I don't know why. I don't know how they arrived, but I think that she stayed in Florence for a month when she came. Obviously, at that time, it's not so easy to go. And so also when she was here, I think stayed for a long time. But how the question is how they arrived here. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do know the answer. Jennifer was asking my wife, should have been listening to my lectures. I did a lecture in Victoria in Florence a couple of years ago, and so I got all the answers. Mark is right, he came by train.
I really think by boat.
No, but
I think that it's the easy way to send things is by boat.
yeah.
And from London to Livorno, for example, and then back to Florence.
Yeah,
I think it's easier
she said
without passing a lot of different countries.
Possibly. She came 3 times. She came by train herself with all her family and all her servants and everything. She came in 88, 93, and 94. The visits got shorter. The earlier visits were about 3 months, but then the last one was, I think, only a month or 6 weeks. And she stayed twice at Il Palmarino and once at Fabricotti.
The last one, so she was in Villa Fabricotti, and the last one, Brogi took the picture.
That's right. Yeah. And there's a memorial fountain stuck in a car park on the wrong side of the road from the entrance to the Cascina. And it's very neglected, but it's still there if you look carefully. Beside a telephone box in the car park.
Another question, I hope easier than the first one.
Just out of curiosity, was the Hotel Gran Bretagna, did it eventually become the one which is now called Berchielli?
I don't know. It's the same. The place is
Because
more or less the same.
Berchielli runs between the Lugarno and Borgo Santissimo Apostoli.
It's possible. I don't really know if it's the same.
I just wondered.
There is an essay, very, very good, by a student for his PhD about the hotels and in Florence during that period.
Okay. More thanks on the Zoom chat. And there's a question here, which I'm trying to find. Here it is. Francesca Balgi asks, how much do we know about the commissions? Did the British owners call in the Alinari and Brogi to document their work, or the villas were subject to photo campaigns organized by the company? Who was
all the photo when we have the acronym APA, we can be sure that were paid by the commission, were commissioned by someone. And in many cases, when you have a lot of images from APA, for example, in another presentation, I spoke about the historical houses in Tuscany, and for example, Castello di Brocco. We have a lot of photos, and almost all the photos are APA ones, so we can look very easily. What we want to do more easily, because these huge books are not so simple to handle, is to have a situation that we can look into very, very fast and understand in a certain cases the period of the commissions and so on, because it's not easy to look into the books now.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. More thoughts or questions from the room? Carla.
Grazie mille per questa bellissima conferenza. Besides the Alinari brothers and the British photographer, so some pictures of, how many photographers work for the Alinari?
How?
How many photographers work for the Alinari? Quanti fotografi lavoravano per gli Alinari?
I have no answer about it. In the most favorable periods of work, they have tens of people working there. And many of them were first, but I don't know. We don't have in any way a documentation regarding who did what. We didn't have it. All the photographs are signed Fratelli Alinari. We can understand from for example, the photos by Vittorio Alinari, who was the son of Leopoldo, are very easy to understand, but we don't have any documents about it.
And we have lots of fan mail from Bernadette Delaney, Liz Loveland, Linda Falcone, Jonathan Mandelbaum, Yolanda Bethentham, all saying variations on wonderful, thank you, brilliant.
Thank you.
So we got fan mail from the Zoomers. Yeah. And this question from Sherry Doherty. What percentage of the Alinari collection has been digitized so far?
Around 3%.
Wow.
5%.
Yeah. And with the PNR era,
obviously not all the things are to be digitalized. But I think we have a lot of. We started with the digitalizing of small funds, important and small, because we can do it completely before they choose. No, this photo is good. That one no, and so for the scholars, not for people, but for the scholar, it's impossible to look through the files into the real nature of the archives. And so for us, it's important to make the complete digitalization of a file. And so we started with the small one. But for example, we are going now with the PNR project to digitalize 80,000, that is a huge amount of images, all plates by Alinari. And we are working on, but it's, I don't know, an eternal work.
How many items in the archive altogether?
5 million.
5 million. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, it'll take a while to get right. Yeah. Okay.
I'm very young, so
wonderful. The real life's work. All right. Any more in the room? I think we're getting towards wine time. Zoomers, any more from you guys? Okay. Yeah. So Sherry makes the point that AI is manipulating images all over the place, so that historical images are even more important than ever to preserve them as they actually are. So I think we're getting to the point of the evening where we can adjourn next door for wine. Sorry, Zoomers, we don't do virtual wine, but you will have one on us wherever you are, unless you're on the West Coast, in which case you probably better have a cup of coffee. So it just remains to thank very much once again tonight's sponsors and oh God, give me a moment, bloody hell. Angela and Richard Canberra, thank you. Whoa, come back to me. Thank you very much, Angela and Richard. Round of applause for that. Proud of myself in disgrace. And we'll just go through for the wine from our seasoned partners, Basilica Caravaggio. And if you want to visit them tomorrow, there's still pictures on the bus. So was that. But last but not least, thank you so much to Giorgio for a most fascinating lecture this evening.
thank you.
Bravo.
Yeah.